crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with host David Lamb and the attorneys of Hollis Wright.
Hello and welcome into the attorneys. We're so grateful you decided to join us tonight. I got a really interesting topic of conversation tonight and an awesome panel that I just know you're going to just love. So here are the ground rules for the night. All right, so at the bottom of your screen, all throughout the program, there are ways you can call, text, email, and get in touch with us. We always say the show is better the more you're involved in it, so get involved with the show. We'd love to hear from you. Also, Hollis Wright does something really neat. They make attorneys available each and every Sunday night. They're available and live. They're standing by to speak with you. So if you need some free legal advice, that's a free, off-air, and confidential conversation with an actual attorney from Hollis Wright. So take advantage of that opportunity. Again, it's yours for the taking all throughout the show this evening. Michael Eldridge from Hollis Wright. He's here to lead our conversation. Hope you're doing okay.
I'm doing good. How are you, David?
Doing very well, thank you.
Good to be with you tonight, and got an important topic.
We certainly do, yeah.
It's one that I feel like we're hearing about more and more. It's always been there, but as we progress as a society, it's one that's become more prevalent and people are talking about more. And I think the laws are changing more, and that's workplace discrimination.
Right.
And we're going to learn that there's various laws on this that are nuanced, and there's a specialization in it. But there's all different types of discrimination as well. So that's why we've brought on an expert, one of our friends, Kira Fonteneau, who's going to be our expert on workplace discrimination today. First of all, thank you for being here with the 5 Points Law Group. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you guys do over there before we jump into this.
Well, I'm Kira Fonteneau, and I'm a lawyer, and I handle employment discrimination cases, and that is primarily anything that can go wrong between you and your employer. We only represent employees, and we don't represent employers because we think it's important that you have someone that's on your side that understands your needs as an employee.
Sure, and I assume certainly as discrimination goes, as the employee, you're kind of in an isolated situation. I've had various jobs. I'm sure you've had various jobs. Sometimes you're high, sometimes you're in the middle, sometimes you're low. But in all those situations, as an employee, you are kind of on your own little island. And as it relates to the cases that you've had in terms of discrimination, are there some types of discrimination that are more common than others? What do you commonly see from the people that you speak with and represent?
We see a lot of areas of discrimination, and a lot of times people call us thinking that they're being discriminated based on their race, but there's so many other ways that they can be discriminated against. And oftentimes it kind of slips over, they don't even think about it. Common ones are age, if you're over 40, if you have a disability, if you sought leave to take care of a medical emergency. There's so many different things, including pregnancy, national origin, your religion. There's just a number of backgrounds where you could be discriminated against and not even know that that's the basis of it.
Did you hear that age starts at 40?
Hey, I perked up. I'm going to dial in.
I thought he's going to have a question on that. So in terms of if you have been the victim of discrimination for whatever reason you just said, and like you said, there's a lot of different ways to be discriminated against or potentially discriminated against. What are your options in the labor and employment world in terms of remedying or being compensated or stopping that discrimination?
Really, one of the first things that you should probably do is seek counsel, but at the first step, when you're starting to feel that someone is doing something that you don't feel right, you're supposed to go to HR. And it's really interesting that HR is really probably not your friend. They're not really going to resolve the problem for you, but you do need to report it if someone's doing something to you that you feel is inappropriate.
And is that just so there is a record of it more than anything?
That's correct. You want to make a record of your discrimination complaint so that they actually have to initiate their own investigation of it. But don't think that HR is going to fix it. Your next step is often the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
Or the EEOC, which
Correct.
it's easier for us to say. I'm not even going to try to say that. All right, so explain that. Explain what the EEOC is and and what an EEOC claim looks like for us.
So an EEOC complaint is a charge of discrimination, that's what they call it, and it is the first step in many, not all, employment discrimination cases. So if you have something that's based on your race, your sex, your ethnic origin, your disability, those things are going to go to the EEOC first, and you have a very short window to get there. You have to do it within 180 days.
Okay, and that's a hard deadline from the date of the incident or the date of what you're complaining on?
For the types of claims that the EEOC investigates, if you don't go there within 180 days, you have lost your claim.
All right, I'm going to jump to a topic that it's probably going to be hard to cover in one segment, but it is one that comes up a lot, and that is race and the issue of race and racial discrimination. It's been going on since the beginning of time. It continues today. It may be getting better, but it still exists. If you feel or you've got a claim for racial discrimination, what are and this is the law school brain in me, what do I got to prove other than just saying I've been discriminated against? What are the elements that someone's got to be able to show to have a valid, viable claim for racial discrimination against an employer?
Oh, it's actually sort of simple, but sort of not. You have to prove that you're in the protected class. And one of the most important things to understand is we're all in that protected class. And then that means that you have a race, any race. Then you have to prove that you're qualified for your job, that you were doing your job as you were supposed to, that something bad happened to you. It could be that you lost a promotion, that you were demoted, that you were penalized for something that everyone else was doing that were of a different race, that you were terminated. And then that either a person who was not in the same protected class as you, or that a person who was in a different protected class was treated less harshly than you under the same circumstances. If you can prove those things, then the burden shifts to the employer to explain why they did what they did.
And it seems like it's somewhat of a, especially in an at-will employment state, you mentioned termination, kind of a hard thing to prove, right? No one's going to say, I fired that person because they were X race, or I didn't give them promotion, they were X race. Can you use circumstantial evidence like patterns of behavior and certain people getting promotion and certain points of treatment where you don't have to have an employer come out and say, hey, I'm a racist, and I didn't give this person a promotion or I treated him this way because I'm a racist?
Exactly. We almost never get someone saying, hey, I don't like black people.
We could just weed them out. That would be great.
That would be awesome. It doesn't happen as much. What we look for is sort of a course of conduct with that person. We're going to get, if we get into a trial situation, we're going to get into, well, you disciplined my client for being late 5 times, but here's this person who is a different race and they were late 10 times and they didn't get fired. That's circumstantial evidence of discrimination. And people don't know this, but circumstantial evidence is just as valid as direct evidence, which is what people are looking for. I told you I did this because you were white. That is obviously inappropriate. That's evidence of direct evidence, but that's not what's necessary in court.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult to have everything on camera and people come out and say exactly why they did what they did.
Let us take our first break. All right, we're going to step aside just real quick. As we do so, just a reminder about Hollis Wright in social media. Wherever you are on social media, Hollis Wright is there. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. So just search the phrase Hollis Wright, you'll find them. And it's a great follow, a great educational, informational follow to help kind of keep you in the know when it comes to legal matters that we believe matter to you. So stay with us. We're coming right back.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show 8 years ago, my hope was we would be able to do what we do best, which is to help people answer real-world legal-related issues they have in their life.
People oftentimes are confronting various legal issues and problems in their lives that range across the gamut of legal practice areas. Bankruptcy, criminal law, family law, just to name a few. And to be able to have a 30-minute platform or format to where we can just cover various legal topics once a week, that's obviously the primary focus of the show.
That we would be able to use the resources of the many lawyers we have at this law firm to create a plan that had a lasting impact that also gave back to the community at the same time. And I think we've done just that with the attorneys.
Welcome back into the attorneys. Appreciate you being with us. A reminder before we get back to our conversation here that attorneys from Hollis, Wright, they're standing by live right now to speak with you. So that's going to be all throughout the program tonight. So about another 20 minutes or so they're available. So take advantage of that opportunity. Talking about discrimination, workplace discrimination here. I'm curious, nationally, the state of Alabama does not have the best reputation when it comes to matters of discrimination, racial discrimination. I mean, this is like the cradle of the civil rights movement, right? So this is not breaking news. So I'm curious how the state is doing, or that you've seen. Is progress being made when it comes to racial discrimination or workers' rights, and kind of are we progressing? Are we growing? Are we learning from our past mistakes, I guess?
So I'd like to think that we are. I think that as we grow and integrate together and we live amongst each other and we socialize with each other, these things will decrease, I think, in a natural way. But I also want us to understand we are no different than any other state. You can go to New York or Michigan or Texas or Virginia, and they still have lawsuits based on race discrimination, right, just like we do. Now, we may have a worse reputation for it, but we are by no means by ourselves. Right. But I do think that they change. There will be trends. Recently, the Supreme Court has issued guidance that said people who are in the LGBTQ community are now covered by some of our discrimination laws cases. And now I've seen a lot more of those people reaching out, talking about what's happened to them. And so what we hear is, as things come up in the news, Me Too, we see an uptick of people thinking that maybe they've been harmed. Right. But I don't think that it's going down.
Right.
Yeah. You mentioned Me Too, and you mentioned New York, and I think about Cuomo, and recently with his excuse being that he's Italian, which I think is kind of funny, but at the same time it's not a great excuse either. When it comes to that with the sexual harassment, I think, at least in my position, when I see these things from the outside looking in, that there is a level of miscommunication, and I think the big thing that the other side or the employers latch onto, whether it be Matt Lauer or whoever, is that these things happened a long time ago. And that's kind of what the Me Too movement supported, was it's time to speak up and say what happened to you. Now that it seems like we're somewhat on the other side of that, when I say the other side of that, the Me Too movement, what would your advice be in this kind of gray world of sexual harassment? If you feel like you have been sexually harassed, what's that first step look like so they can't use that against you? They can't say that happened in 2012.
Well, they can say it happened in 2012. The most important thing that says a lot of things that we're hearing about with these old claims, there's nothing we can do about those. The most important, and the reason why you have to get to the EEOC within 180 days, the reason why you have to go to HR as soon as these things happen is because that does preserve your claims. And so it's a lot easier for us to pull video footage or to find witnesses when you've told us about it right after it happened.
It's ripe, it's all there.
And people, juries, sometimes don't believe people who wait to tell their story. And there's a lot of reasons why people wait to tell their story. There's a lot of harm that can have gone on for them that made it difficult for them to tell their stories. But the best thing that we can always do is report it early. Sometimes you can get the conduct to stop. And I think a lot of times people feel like they're alone and they can't stop someone from doing something when they're misusing their power. But the first step, always, you need to report it to HR. They have a duty to investigate when you do that.
And I've never been sexually harassed, and certainly never been sexually harassed in the workplace, but as any kind of employee, and whether it was something that violated a labor and employment standard, we've all dealt with things. And at least for me, when I've got a complaint, or even an EEOC claim, my biggest fear would be, how are my bosses going to respond to this? How's this going to look for me? Because I'm kind of severing this relationship. Are they going to fire me? What would you say to that in terms of that fear? Because that has to be real. The fear of retaliation, and the fear of losing your job if you do what you're supposed to do, which is, report it.
Well, we hear that concern every day, and the one thing that we have to tell them is Title VII and every single one of the statutes we help people enforce for themselves has a retaliation provision. So it says if they do terminate you because you make that complaint, then you have a right. I always tell people, oftentimes it's not about the party, it's about the after party. And the party is the original discrimination, right? Something that you believe was wrong. You could be wrong and it not meet the standard of an actionable claim. But if they terminate you because you reported it, you now have a claim for the retaliation. That's the after. Right. Yeah, you can. That's the after party, right? That is, and oftentimes the retaliation claims are far more actionable than the original complaint that people have, because oftentimes there are real consequences, but there are risks in not reporting it, and there are risks in reporting it in a way that doesn't give them a sense that it's discrimination. And it almost seems like to me, when you do report it because of Title VII, like you said, it almost puts the pressure back on the employer of, let's say they had a real reason that they needed to fire you. Like, now you're almost protected in that sense from a circumstantial standpoint, that they have to take you seriously, because if they don't, if they dismiss you or they terminate you within a short period after that could be used against them. So it could almost protect you, but that fear is obviously very real. It will at least allow the employer to take a step back and say, is the basis that possibly this harasser or discriminator is giving to us for taking these actions a valid one? Right. But the important thing is, you need to say trigger words. This is not, you can't go in there and say, I'm afraid to play the race card. I'm afraid to play the gender card. You got to play every card you have in your hand, and you need to make them face up. Do not pass it under the table. I believe my employer discriminated against me because of my race, because of my disability. Say those words. If you believe it, you need to say it.
All right. We've got to step aside. You guys are just buzzing right through this show. Y'all are covering some ground here. We're stepping aside. Our final break of the evening. More of the attorneys coming right up. Stay with us.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright. As with any industry, it's important in the legal world to hire an attorney that is knowledgeable and has a track record of success. But with so many attorneys out there and so many different types of cases, how does someone decide the right lawyer to hire? In this week's Legal 4-in-1, we're answering the question, what should I consider in hiring an attorney? In-state versus out-of-state, big firm or little firm, recommendations from friends or family, the internet, the phone book, or TV. With so many choices and so much information, it can be an overwhelming task trying to make the right decision. To complicate things, choosing a lawyer is an important and sometimes life-affecting decision and should not be taken lightly. So how do you select an attorney? First, do your research. Look the firm up on the internet. Learn about the cases they handle and the results they get. Second, find out what clients are saying about the firm. Many websites provide client testimonials or have a star ranking system. Use those to your advantage. And finally, Talk with a lawyer from their office and ask them questions. Questions about the volume of cases they handle. Do they return phone calls? Are you just a number or a client that gets the attention you deserve? Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys right here on WVTM 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys, the final segment of The Attorneys right here upon us. So just a few minutes remaining if you want to take advantage of the opportunity to speak with the attorneys from Hollis Wright who are standing by live. A question we've got here I want to toss to you two. I thought, this is the question that we've got. I thought Alabama was an employee at will state. Do all these laws apply in Alabama? Is Alabama an employee at will state?
This is so important. At will means that they can fire you for no reason or any reason at all. A lot of times people will say, I can fire you for wearing that blue shirt.
Okay.
And yes, they can fire you for wearing that blue shirt, but they cannot fire you for being a white man wearing that blue shirt.
Okay.
And so there are laws that modify at will, and it is not carte blanche for the employer to do anything that they want to do and fire you or hire you for any reason at all. They have to follow federal law, which is supreme over the Alabama state law that says that they can fire you for any reason.
Okay.
So EEOC trumps Alabama.
Every day.
All right.
It's the, one thing, because what we do in a lot of ways is similar. Mine deals mostly with businesses and trucking companies and things like that. But there is a sense of there is a wrong that's been done, and then there's a system to right that wrong. And all too often, regardless, I like to, I used to defend corporations and defend insurance companies and defend trucking companies, and would think, well, let's think about things in the future that we could do to make, the federal motor carriers, more safe, or to make, Publix more safe for its business invitees. What are some things in your experience that you think employers could do at whatever level to help, minimize the discrimination that is happening?
Well, it's an important question, because a lot of times we will get calls from people and we will give them advice about what to do, and the problem resolves. And there's actually nothing better than us being able to help a person not get fired, because it's incredibly, disturbing to people's lives, right? If you lose your job, you lose all kinds of things. But for employers, I think the most important thing to do is listen and have a team of people that is very able to listen and hear the perspectives of all the people in their workplace. And if you have a team that only looks like you might not hear all of the things that people are saying, because people may not trust you with that information. So create an environment where people feel comfortable voicing their concerns, and then address those concerns so that, it doesn't bubble up to a person believing that they have been discriminated against. A lot of times, because there's this shrouded in mystery kind of decision-making processes, employees think they're ganging up on me. And if you're open and you share with your employees exactly what you need to do well, and then you live up to those ideals, I think a lot of problems can be resolved. And also, a lot of times you might have one bad apple. But if your employees see you taking that bad apple, removing it from the barrel, and making the employment situation better for everyone, they'll trust you. And they won't presume that you did something wrong, when all you're trying to do is make sure that whatever you're processing gets out the door.
Yeah, I agree, because I think generally in anything, but certainly something like your employment, communication on the front end, because sometimes it's not a good fit, right? And so if you communicate with people on the front end about who you are, what your vulnerabilities are as an employer, what your vulnerabilities are as an employee, we could avoid this situation altogether, because you may not want to work at this place. And so I couldn't agree more that the communication, but I do feel like employers have this kind of gut reaction of, cut it out, you're a problem if you're saying you're being racially or sexually discriminated against. And there may be some bad apples in that, but that's obviously not the norm. And so I think that's great advice in terms of the communication.
But don't you also, I have found the greatest leaders that I've ever known or worked with, when faced with something of maybe a bad apple, they don't do this. They realize it and accept it and deal with it, and then use that as an opportunity to improve the culture, to progress and to grow and mature and maybe even evolve. And I think that's what great leaders do, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes what we think, when we hear these negative things about the culture in our organizations or just about a person that we know, like, and trust, our first thought is like, how could I let this happen, right? And so it's an indictment of their own personal their personality or their culture or their values, and it's really not. It's feedback. Yeah. And what we do with feedback is either we take it and we assimilate it, as you said, or we don't, and then things fester. And so I think the most important part is to don't take this personally. If you put 5 people in a room, 2 of them are going to get mad at each other. If you leave them in there fighting, then now we're going to have 3-on-2 at some point, and those things are going to get worse. And so I think that if we can kind of take this from a 50-foot view as opposed to really getting close to it, I think oftentimes removing that emotion and understanding that people are going to have disagreements, and we just have to sift through them.
We could spend a lot of time on this subject matter, but we're less than 2 minutes now, and I want to give you both a chance for a final thought, and if you would, you go first, please.
Well, I think the most important part is to be empowered in your work relationships. Make sure that you take an active voice in your career, and make sure that the people who can help you know when you need help, and that you don't quit your job just because you feel like something bad has happened to you, that you try to reform the relationship, that you try to give your employer an opportunity to fix it. And if not, if you can't, then call us, and then we can help you figure out what your right next steps are.
That's good. Michael?
Yeah, I think my big takeaway, David, was the importance of timely notice. The fact is, everything in the litigation and the legal process is adverse. And I do it, Kira does it, we all do it, in the sense that we find things that are our strengths in our case, and we leverage those strengths against our adversary. And you don't know in that moment whether or not your sexual discrimination event is going to end up in litigation, but getting it on the record is going to preserve the credibility of that claim. So don't be afraid to get it on the record, because you could lose the credibility, and you could lose a potential EEOC claim that's viable.
Fascinating show tonight. Thank you very much for being with us. Really interesting. Good to see you, and good to see you as well. Hope this time this was a little heavier, but a lot of ground to cover. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. I know it has been helpful and impactful to me. So I appreciate you all being with us, and appreciate you being with us as well. We're grateful for it, as we say each and every Sunday night. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate you, and we'll look for you next week, same time, right here. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.